You're listening to Building a Creative Life. I'm Pam Vale, an artist and writer. This podcast is about the small, often overlooked ways creativity shows up in real life, in what we notice and in what we choose to respond to. Here you'll find conversations and reflections shaped by curiosity, not instruction. No expectations, nothing to master. Just room to pay attention and trust where that leads. Today I'm talking with author Pat Daly. Pat's journey moves from Air Force pilot to science fiction author, and that shift alone piqued my curiosity. We talked about how a background in science and aviation shapes his creative process, and how discipline and research play a role in the stories he tells. We also explore creative freedom within constraints, the importance of noticing the world around you, and how inspiration often grows out of ordinary, everyday attention. It's a conversation about storytelling, about presence, and about the shape a creative life can take when you allow it to evolve. Stay tuned with us till the end for my reflections. Hello, Pat. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Pam. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I'm looking forward to chatting with you because after reading about you, I find there's like a lot that I'm super interested in, but there's a lot of things that I don't know about or I don't understand. So I'm excited to talk to you and learn a little bit about you and your creative process.
All right.
Yeah. If you could give our audience a little background on you and what you do.
Okay. Grew up in Seattle, Washington. Currently live in Houston, Texas. Married, 2 daughters. I'm not married to 2 daughters. I am married with 2 daughters.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. I started my professional life as a pilot in the Air Force, became a test pilot, got my engineering degree along the way, flew in the Air Force for a bunch of years, and then left, went briefly to work for American Airlines, got rendered surplus by that company, and that ended up being probably the biggest pivot in my life, and it was probably the best pivot in my life. And we can talk about that more later if you want. And then I got into engineering. I ended up working for Honeywell down at Johnson Space Center on the space shuttle, space station, and a project called the X-38. And that was one step away from what I really wanted to be, and that was an astronaut. But it was close, and it allowed me to learn a lot about the space business and what goes on. And then after, I don't know, maybe 10 years at Honeywell, I decided I think it's time to take the next big step, and that was start my own company. So I started my own business, and I mean, God bless my wife. Our eldest daughter had just started college. And if you want to take a leap that is going to pull a bunch of your financial security away, start a business. And to do that when we've already committed to tuition and stuff, it was a little hairy, and we were in the red for a couple of years. But things started coming back, and I still work in the aviation space. But along the way, I always wanted to write. And so I'd done some nonfiction stuff previously, and I'd actually written a fiction book, and not even my best friends thought it was any good. And
well, but you know what? You were ahead of the curve by actually showing it to people, because a lot of people will just keep it to themselves.
Yeah. And that's a tough thing, isn't it? You create something, you pour your heart and mind and soul into it, and then it's like, do I really want to show this to somebody? And that's tough. So I took a few steps back. I abandoned that project completely, and then started writing again in probably 2016. 2017, and it was it was a pretty long uphill slog. It's not just sitting down at your keyboard and banging out a 100,000 words, and then people are going to start knocking at your door. There's a lot more work involved in actually getting it published than that. But that was 5 books ago. I'm now working on 6, 7, and 8. Uh, Not all in the same series, but all kind of simultaneously.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. That's important. And so much in there. So I would love to hear about your pivot, your big first pivot, and how
Uh-huh.
that like how that set this trajectory of this path towards what you do now. And I'd love to hear. A lot of people that listen to this podcast might be at a point where they're gonna like do something voluntary to change their life or pivot, or might have things sort of forced upon them. And so I like hearing about those transitions because they happen to everyone.
Yeah, I would say that it was a life-saving change, because I've been a pilot in the Air Force, and everything is based on how good you are at your job. That defines what you fly, that defines when you get promoted, all that stuff. And suddenly I was working for an airline where once you hit a very minimum level of competency, what matters is what day you got hired. And uh, I found myself within the first year, I hated my job. I hated what I had become. And every time I had to go to work, it was like another stab in the soul. And so, but I don't think, here's what worries me. I don't know if I would have had the courage to quit at the time. I mean, married, 2 small children, and man, uh, but it was absolutely positively the best thing. It did not feel like the best thing for several years, but then things started looking up, and I felt like I was in control again, and that really helped me.
And being so close to your dream of being an astronaut, um, in that position, how was that like everything to you at that time? Did you have creative outlets on the side? Did how did that work into your life where you were really close to something and you got to be part of it, which is amazing?
Yeah, I had to do something, and I started doing a little bit of woodworking. Not I'm not that good at it. I started doing a lot of DIY projects around the house. Got better at that. I mean, you swing a hammer enough times, and eventually you get decent at it. Um, and so really, where my imagination took flight was through reading and reading other people's work, and looking at what they had done, and sometimes what they had overcome to get stuff published. And so that kind of kept me going for a while.
What did you like to read?
I've always been a sci-fi fan. Uh, Later, that branched out, and I became a murder mystery fan. Uh, I love J.K. Rowling. I have to thank her for getting my kids to love reading as much as I do, because that whole Harry Potter series. Well, she did a little professional pivot, and she started writing a Private Eye series. It's the Cormorant Strike series, and she writes it under a pen name, which everybody knows now, Robert Galbraith. But they are phenomenal books. They are right up there with the best of the Private Eye genre, and uh, she's such a good writer.
Oh, good to know. The other thing I love about her is that everything started so late. Like it shows you that it's never too late to do what you want to do creatively.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, to build such a career from not just late in life, but she was in terrible financial and personal situations and and overcame it all.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
I love that. I love that part of
hard not
it.
to admire. Yeah.
Definitely. And so, fast forward to when you started writing, and did you like the first books or book that you said that your friends didn't think were great, your family didn't think was great? Was that something that had been like waiting to come out, or was it just something you were like, let me just try something, I just want to wing it and see, or was it like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it was. I've always been a Star Trek fan,
Mm-hmm.
and so that book was fan fiction, and it was like, well, if they put me in charge of Star Trek, this is what would happen, and uh, you know, probably best they'd never put me in charge of Star Trek, because it, maybe some professional writers would have gotten their hands on it and cleaned it up and made it better. Um, and So it wasn't something that was really waiting to get out, and maybe that was part of the problem. I was pushing it. I was pushing myself to do it. Um, but with the next book, once I had the inspiration, it was, well, I can't wait to start writing this.
That's
So
exciting.
hugely different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, really exciting. And it's funny because you mentioning that, it was like, let me see what would happen if, you were part of this world. And I find that a lot of the writers that I talk to, actually a lot of the creatives that I talk to, that's one of the things that motivates them to create is either they want control over the story or they want a product that they haven't seen so they make it. So I think it's a really great reminder for people that just because something isn't out there, it doesn't mean that you can't create it yourself, or that can't be a motivation for writing.
Yeah.
You get to create your world.
Absolutely. Yeah. I earlier in life I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to have my own rock band, be lead singer, lead guitarist, and yeah, that went away pretty quickly. It turns out that in order to be good at music, you have to practice
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not enjoy the practice. And that's where that creative outlet is different from writing, because I love the process of writing. I love sitting down in front of my computer, and all the thoughts that I've had since the day before are just bubbling out, ready to get on the page. And so I'm enjoying that part of my life, which I don't think I would have enjoyed the forcing myself to practice the guitar.
Right. And I think, different stages of our lives too, like we come and go from what interests us.
Yeah.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
so when you sit down to write, do you always write on a computer or did you ever write longhand?
Never written much beyond notes
Okay.
longhand. I, I'll do an outline, uh, and sometimes that's fun to do someplace other than at my desk. Sitting outside in the backyard, or even in a coffee shop, or if I'm on a trip and I happen to be by myself, sitting in a restaurant. Because honestly, dining alone is both incredibly lonely and incredibly liberating.
I agree.
Uh, when you're sitting in a restaurant by yourself, generally people don't bug you,
Hmm.
and so
Especially if
so
you
you
got a
have this.
notepad.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'll write an outline by hand, but then the rest is all on my computer, because I have horrible penmanship,
Hmm.
and it just is not as easy. That I've told my daughters this, and that the best course I ever took, or the most beneficial course I ever took, was in high school. I took what we called it typing at the time, but now it's keyboarding. But that's something that I have used almost every day for the last, I don't know, 60% of my life.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I took that same class in high school. Definitely. And when you have all these thoughts or notes in your head that you're ready to put down on the paper the next day, do you capture them anywhere, or do you just assume that you're going to remember like what's important?
well, I sometimes I'll try to take a note to myself, the day before, or I'll be sitting there and I'll go, I'll be right back, and I'll tell everybody, okay, I got to go, and I'll come upstairs and capture a note. And the way I keep them available is because my my desk is littered with scraps of paper that I've written stuff on, and uh, I try to transfer them into the document that I'm working from. I try to put that as part of the outline. Well, if this character is going to do this, where, when, I get a scene in my mind, but where's that scene going to take place, and what's the surrounding environment, and what pushes them to that scene. So I keep that outline at the bottom of my manuscript so that it's always there to remind me.
That's great. And I think that what you do, the type of writing you do, is so difficult because you do have to keep and you also have multiple books. Are they all in a series? Are they all similar characters? Or are they?
Yeah, four of them are all in a series. The others completely different.
Okay. Because keeping things consistent, or keeping that, the details consistent, that must be very difficult. The kind of writing I do, chapters can get moved all around and it doesn't matter, but for you, it's a whole different, like, mental outlook of being consistent.
Yeah, and it's also a little humbling
Yeah.
because you start writing book two, and you have to remember what happened in book one. And I could probably go to the electronic manuscript, but I'd rather just turn around and pull one of the books off the shelf and leaf through it there. And suddenly you're looking for something to remind you, and you read a few sentences and you go, oh, that's terrible. You're cringing at your own work. And I go,
Yeah.
and then you fall down the rabbit trail of, do I go back and update book one? Nope, nope. That ship has sailed. Leave it in the past and move on to what's next.
Definitely. I know you had suggested talking about the creative freedom within constraints, and or like confined areas. And I think that's something really important to talk about, because I've always felt that I have the most creative freedom when I have some kind of boundaries, whether it's, in my art licensing business. I love when a manufacturer will give me a color palette, or, a basic idea of something that they're looking for, or some kind of guideline or brief and then I can go like nuts inside of that. And I feel like there's so much more creative freedom in that. And I just found it really interesting that was something that resonates with you, and you have such a different medium. And I would love it if you could talk a little bit about how that works for you.
Yeah, happy to do that. I think I was taking a psychology class. So it was either undergrad or grad school, something like that. And they were talking about an experiment that they had done with school children. And what they had done was the school had a big playground around it, a fenced-in playground. And they took the fence down. Now, when the kids were outside, they still had people monitoring, because, you don't want them running out in the road and chasing the ball and all that kind of stuff. But what they found was that without the fence, the kids started congregating closer and closer to the building and the center of the playground. And they put the fence back up, and boom, they're using the whole playground. And I think the creative process is a lot like that. You have to know, like you said, with the color palette. if you have some constraints, then I think you can run right up against them and bounce off, and you go, okay, okay, that's now I know where the edge is. Um, and for me, that constraint has been I like to write what people call hard science fiction. And in that, I try to be as faithful to the state of science and engineering as I can. Now, I'm always going to push it because I'm pushing things into the future, and alternate book I'm working on now is alternate timelines, uh, and so you have to decide where the wall is and where you can push it back or do something different. But I come back to this is what I promise. This is what I promise myself. This is what I promise my readers.
So interesting. I love, I love that story, and it's so visual, and I have felt that. I have felt when there's too much open space in a design, request, that it's just, it makes you want to shrink. It just doesn't feel like the freedom.
Yeah, yeah. We used to in aviation we used to call it the freedom of a locked room, where you have very rigid boundaries on what you can and can't do. And a lot of those are decisions that you need to make in an instant.
Mm.
And so all that work has to be done ahead of time so that when the engine catches fire or when something bad happens, you react quickly and correctly. And I think sometimes that discipline, that constraint is crucial to creativity as well.
Yeah, it really is. You think you would think like more freedom would be better, but I agree with you definitely. And with your technical background and your aviation background, and obviously, the things that you work on with your business, do you find that helps in your writing, or do you think does it get in the way of what you're trying to do? Like, because like scientifically the way things are supposed to happen. So does that help you like play with that, or does it?
It does.
It does.
It does.
Okay.
I think it helps me tremendously. I've got I've got a broad knowledge, but not necessarily all that deep.
Okay.
And so if I need, so I end up doing a bunch of research when I'm writing my books because I don't want to goon it up. I don't want to be the science fiction writer that does something so blatantly wrong that he's laughed out of the genre.
So that's good that you have that background.
It does help.
I know you said you are a gamer, and I'm
Yeah.
very interested in talking about that because I feel like people have very mixed feelings or maybe misconceptions about video games. And do you play on a computer or like on Xbox or?
Yeah, I'm a console gamer. Currently, my number one machine is a PS5.
Oh, okay. So my husband and my son and my family, they're all gamers also, and they like the role playing, open world
Yeah.
games also. And for me as an artist, it is fascinating to watch. Like I remember the excitement that they had, my son had specifically when I think it was Skyrim came out, and just or even like what's the one with the Assassin's Creed, right? And like
Yeah.
just watching the art on the screen for me, like I would
Mhm.
sit and watch him play it. But I would love it if you could talk a little bit about why. I'm sure you just enjoy it, but also why it's important to you and what do you get out of it, maybe creatively or as I know my husband uses it as an escape, or like a way to relax or meditate. So I would love it if you could share a little bit about your view of video games.
Yeah, it's certainly an escape, and I actually don't like games that have too much realism.
Okay.
So there's the whole Gears of War series, and that's just not for me. But like Skyrim, okay, yeah, give me a few dragons, give me clearly defined good guys and bad guys, and so I know who to attack. Um, And you are right. The art that goes into some of this is just absolutely phenomenal. And I have no idea how they do it because it must take thousands of hours to create one of these games. But it's it's an escape. It's also a little relaxation. I think when I get frustrated with something at work or something with writing, I'm going to go slay a few orcs. I'm just going to fire up the PS5 and here we go.
Absolutely. I've heard that many times from my husband. I'm just going to go shoot something or whatever. And I think that also that there's other layers to it. I know they're very into Fallout, and you think about the soundtrack that they used for Fallout, and has exposed young people to classic standard, the Great American Songbook and standard music, and it has all these other things that they don't even realize, that it's infused with. So I think there's like a lot of benefits of it.
Yeah, I think you can learn from any art.
Absolutely.
And I like it when some of that learning is intentional,
Yes.
that the creator or the artist will infuse their knowledge of the world uh, and maybe the subject that they're dealing with into their art, and then you don't even realize that you're learning it,
Mm.
but suddenly you know way more about it than you did before you started playing.
I feel like, the little that I know about your genre, that must be the case for your writing. I feel like if, you're coming from a place of knowledge, it's not just fantasy for you. I feel like the foundation of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I I think that gaming is the future of education
Mm.
because school's not a whole lot of fun. I mean, yeah, it can be fun, but you look at the amount of time that people will invest in learning the right sequence of button pushes to, kill the orc or to scale the wall or to take out this bad guy, solve a puzzle. And I think where in my vision of education in the future, we can do that with math and science, and I certainly think we can do it with language arts and social studies. And it's just you infuse the little knowledge and the critical thinking, and suddenly you know way more than you thought you did.
Absolutely. And it's effortless and enjoyable.
Yeah.
It makes it enjoyable. Our son um, started piano lessons when he was 2. He was 2.5. And my dad was a musician, my dad was a singer, and that was one thing he always wanted when he knew I was pregnant. He wanted him to learn how to read music. So we started him really young. And what they did, and he's 26 now, um, but it was through a computer. It was through, because he couldn't read. He was 2.5. He didn't know what the letters were. So the keyboard was connected to a screen, and he would like pop balloons, and it would correspond with the keyboard. Or it was, I know there was another one that was like a conveyor belt, like at a grocery store, and he would be like putting things in the basket. And so for him, like, he knew how to read music before he could read because of this, like, mind body visual thing that he thought he was playing games. So I completely agree with that. I think that's an amazing thought.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, now he's 26 and he's a professional musician, so it's very cool.
Oh, ending.
Yeah. What other things inspire you? Like, where else, other than your work, where else, and obviously, like, you like movies and video games, where do you get your inspiration?
Uh, my kids.
Okay.
Um, Also, sometimes I dream something vivid enough that it ends up being put into the story. Uh, and also, I we've had dogs, or at least one dog and one cat, at least in our house forever. Uh, and so somehow it became my responsibility to get the dogs out for their walk in the morning. And I don't object to that. What I do object to is it being 28 degrees outside and windy and raining, and they are still just as excited to go out and smell all the smells, but I'm not that enthusiastic. So I do a lot of thinking and looking when I'm out in nature. Uh, I used to have a favorite trail that I would take them on, and we had had some floods in Houston. And the next time when the trails finally dried out enough, I went. I took the dogs and we're running, and a couple of weird things are happening. First, once there's this big creek, and there's a whirlpool going in this creek, and I thought, where's it going? What's it? Because if you're going to have a whirlpool, that water is getting pulled someplace, so it's got to end up someplace. And sometimes you see it whitewater rafting. People get stuck in a little corkscrew, but then you have where the water comes out against a rock or something else. So I started thinking about that whole whirlpool thing, and then later the same run, we're running along the path, and there's two things. One is somebody's lawn chair is now up in a tree, and the other is a big chunk, probably a 40-pound chunk of wood, is also suspended in a tree. Different trees, but that made me think a little bit about, well, one, the power of water and that much water, and then it's also, you start wondering about the journey that these things took, and just pondering the difference, and that I think that helps get inspiration.
Oh my God. Yes. And it's something that I talk about a lot, which is just noticing. It's just being aware and being kind of like open to that, like being active, being out in the world, and then noticing. Like someone might have walked by that little whirlpool and not even looked at it, or maybe been looking at their phone, or I don't know, upset about something, and so they were just focused straight ahead, or something, and I think that that's such a beautiful way to like fuel our creative souls, is just to be in the world and notice. I love that. That was gold to me.
Yeah, and you can find that a few years ago there was a video clip that was making the rounds, and someone in New York, somebody with a camera, had filmed a bunch of sequences of discarded plastic bags and their flights through the air and spinning, and then they put all these clips together, set it to music, and for something that is essentially trash, they turned that into a work of art. And the music was great. You could almost feel what the plastic bag must have felt. I'm being buoyed up by this wind. And
I
now I'm
love
being
that.
cast down.
It shows you anything can be art, anything can be creative,
Yeah.
anything.
But you're right. You got to notice it.
You have to notice it. You have to be present and open to receiving it. And then, and then even just doing the next step, which, for you is like being curious and like questioning. And then, who knows, maybe that ends up in one of your books somewhere, that something happens. And, I think that there's creative inspiration everywhere. I mean, you could be at the market. You could be looking at plastic bags. I think you just have to be aware. Yeah. Definitely.
And I hadn't really thought of it until I watched a previous episode of yours. You had the gentleman on, I don't remember his name, but it was about designing space for creativity.
Oh, yes. Taylor Stewart for conscious home design. Yeah.
I thought, ooh, that's a really interesting concept, because I tend to think of my house as utilitarian. It exists for a need, And clearly, I see it differently than my wife does, and what my concept of what's beautiful or what should be here is not, you know, doesn't always make it past the board of directors. Um, but the idea that you could intentionally create or mold your space to provide inspiration and provide not just the outlet, but a supporting infrastructure for your work. I thought, wow, that's a pretty cool concept.
It is. And to make you like make your habits more accessible, or to give you a shot at success of like keeping up on habits. I thought that was very interesting too. Like your
Yeah.
space can support that. Yeah, definitely. Do you when you so in your space, like when you're writing, do you? I know you write on your computer, but do you have like any kind of rituals? Do you like have a cup of coffee? Do you have music? Like, what do you like? What's your experience like when you're writing?
Yes to all of that.
Okay.
Um, I I think my most creative time is early in the day. And so, there's some things that just have to happen in the morning. You got to walk the dog, you got to feed the dog. So I get that done. And then I've got a few other little rituals that I do. And then it's okay. Generally, the house is still quiet because I'm an early riser. And so then I grab my coffee and I come up to my desk and I sit down and go from there. Um, I do listen to music. Um, and I change the music based on what I'm writing. I
Okay.
like to have something a little more melodious if I'm writing about emotional responses or relationships between people that don't involve conflict. Um, but if I'm writing a fight scene, I go right to the hard rock,
Like
and
what? What do you listen to?
I listen to a fair amount of AC/DC.
Okay.
And gosh, I could call it my writing playlist. But also, once Ozzy died, I revisited a bunch of his catalog and started listening to some of that. And there's an old, uh, I have some rap, some hip hop on there as well. Um, I experimented with electronic dance music for a while, and that didn't work for me as far as writing. Um, I've got some chants, the Benedictine monks, they're chanting, and that sometimes that's good for calming me down after I've written a fight scene, and I need to bring the story back down a little bit.
I love that you create an environment for yourself. Like you craft an environment.
Yeah, yeah, because I think when you're feeling emotion or what you feel makes it onto the page. And so if you can help yourself get into the appropriate emotion for that scene through external stimuli like music, that helps a lot.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think that can apply to any creative outlet. Definitely helps support it. Do you have any suggestions for someone who might be thinking about starting out writing?
I'd say the best time to start writing your novel or whatever you're going to write was 10 years ago. The next best time to start it is today. So start writing, um, thicken up your skin a little bit, because if you ask for honest feedback, don't be surprised if you get it. Um, and but they have to be people you trust, right? Because they have to understand. They don't have to understand writing, but they have to be readers. They have to understand or know how a story should flow and how it feels. So absolutely start now. write as quickly as you can. It's all going to be horrible, but that's what revisions are for.
Right.
You, you write fast, you write poorly, and you write things that are wrong. Uh, and then the great thing about writing is you get to go back and fix all that. You know, the the whole novel experience is a world of do-overs. My my first novel, I went through 8 drafts before I finally had
Wow.
something that was sellable.
That's perseverance. Definitely.
Yeah.
And you had support from your family while you were doing this?
Yes, and so so we've got a Friday night tradition in my family. We go out for Mexican food. And so I was really excited about this story that had popped into my head, and I'd sketched the outline. And so it's Friday afternoon, and Friday afternoon is our or Friday evening when we go out to dinner. That's our decompress time. That's our reconnect time. At that point in our life, the kids were out of the house, so it's just my wife and I. Now, my wife at the time was a school teacher, and by Friday afternoon, there's a reason if you go to a bar that's anywhere close to a school, happy hour on Friday, and you look around, there's going to be a few tables of teachers in there because they need to blow off steam and get a release just like anybody else. So bad timing on my part. I pitched the story to my wife, and she's still in teacher mode, and she's not in supportive spouse mode at this time. And she goes, "Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? This?" And I reacted poorly. And the end of the discussion was fine. When it gets published, I'll read it. And ouch.
Yeah, you
But
got to pick
yeah,
your timing and be careful what you ask
yeah,
for. I love that. But it's
absolutely.
so human. It's so like normal. I can totally relate to that. And I'm sure a lot
Yeah.
of the listeners can relate to that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Pick your maybe the world's greatest idea to you, but if you pitch it at the wrong time,
Absolutely.
you're not going to get the reaction
You
you
got to
want.
know your audience. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to share?
Um, yeah. I was intrigued by your latest post. And I think it's your latest, but I just read it this morning, and it was about um, no longer buying for a creative process you don't enjoy anymore. And and I thought that's really key because I think sometimes we drag along those old, well, and financially bad habits because if you're not going to do it, and you said that you enjoy the product but not the process of what you were talking about, and I thought that's another key that if you're not enjoying the process of what you're creating, maybe it's time to pivot from that as well. And and every once in a while, take that look back. Are you spending time or money on something you don't really enjoy anymore? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you for. I'm glad that that resonated with you because it's definitely
Yeah.
something that we have identities that we take on, and especially, you've been in different, similar arenas, but different careers, and it's like, we can think that we are one thing, and then we shift and we change and we grow and then we have to shed certain things, and sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not, and sometimes we don't even notice it until it's like big. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that resonated with you?
Yeah, it hit home.
Oh, good. Oh, well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you. I will put all of your contact information in the show notes so people can find you and find your books and find out more information about what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, Pam. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. The time has flown
I
by.
know,
So,
it goes quick.
uh, yeah, I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you. And I hopefully I'll see you again soon.
All right. Take care.
There's something I appreciate about people who have lived more than one version of themselves. Pat's story begins in aviation, structure, precision, discipline, the kind of environment where constraints are not optional, but they're built in. And yet, here he is, writing science fiction. I keep thinking about that word constraint. We tend to hear it as a limitation, as something that boxes us in. But listening to Pat, it felt different. It felt like a frame, and frames don't restrict the art, they hold it. In aviation, there are rules. In science, there are laws. In storytelling, there are worlds you build that also have their own internal logic. It made sense to me that someone trained in one would feel at home in the other. But what stayed with me most was the way he talked about noticing. Not grand inspiration, not waiting for lightning to strike, just paying attention to nature, to small details, to everyday objects. The idea that anything can become art if you're willing to see it that way. Creative living at its core is about attention. It's about choosing to look a little longer, to ask more questions, to let something ordinary become interesting simply because you stayed with it. Pat also spoke about discipline in writing. Multiple books and revision and research, the unglamorous parts, and I found that comforting. We sometimes romanticize creativity as spontaneous and effortless, but so much of it is sustained focus, returning to the work, refining it, and letting it mature. There's also something quietly powerful about a pivot, moving from one identity to another, pilot to author, science to fiction. It reminds me that creative lives are not linear tracks, they're evolutions. We don't abandon what we've been, but we carry it forward with us. Listening to Pat, I felt that thread running through all of it. Aviation, science, storytelling, presence, they're not separate chapters, they inform each other. And maybe that's the deep invitation here, to notice what you already carry, to see how your past, your discipline, your constraints might actually be shaping something creative in you right now. Not in a dramatic way and not in reinvention, but in a quiet, ongoing unfolding. And that, to me, feels like the heart of building a creative life. Thank you for being here. I hope something from today's conversation stays with you in a quiet way. If this episode felt meaningful, you're welcome to follow the podcast or pass it along to someone who might enjoy it. Until next time.